Good morning, Chair Vollenhoff, members Garrett and Holmes, staff and guests. The lobbies are open and the recording has begun.
Thank you, Gretchen. Good morning, everyone. I'll now convene the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board meeting for Wednesday, October 8th. Our first agenda item today is approval of meeting minutes. And these are prior to Board Member Holmes joining the LCB. So I'm looking for a motion from Board Member Garrett to approve the meeting minutes as listed on the agenda.
I move that we approve the meeting minutes as listed on the agenda.
Okay, I second that. So moved. Thank you. All right, we'll move right into our first agenda item, which is rulemaking timelines for all industries. And we've got Kevin Walder, our policy and rules manager today, to give us an update, who we heard from yesterday.
Yes, good morning, Chair Vollenhoff and board members Garrett and Holmes. The rules team currently has 13 rulemaking projects open at various stages in the process. As mentioned during caucus, I am very happy to report that we are back to full capacity with Daniel's return this week. And the timing couldn't be better since we're at a critical phase when we'll be moving past the initial informal comment period on several of the projects initiated this summer, and active stakeholder engagement is slated to begin. So looking at our most recent rules activity, we filed a CR 101 on September 24th, responding to a petition that was accepted well over a year ago related to cannabis harvest dates on labels. And we have already received some feedback on that one, both in support and against that. And this brings us up to date, having now cleared the backlog of pending rulemaking projects responding to public petitions.
Nice.
We have also filed the necessary CR 101s to initiate rules projects in response to legislation passed during the last session, leaving only the CR 105 package that combines various updates to dozens of rules to be filed. While we had hoped to have that one ready for the board this month, we had to prioritize other more pressing rulemaking work given the team's limited capacity. But we should be well on track at this point now that we're firing on all cylinders, again, with full staffing. Looking ahead, Jeff will be requesting approval to file the CR 103 to adopt the proposed rules regarding acceptable IDs for both cannabis and alcohol following my update this morning. We also sent a Gov delivery notice earlier this week to stakeholders to advise that we are resuming the cannabis advertising rulemaking that has been on pause now for over a year in order to align existing rules with engrossed Senate Bill 5206. An informal comment period for this project will run through the end of the month. Internal project team discussions and preliminary drafting efforts are well underway for cannabis R&D testing and samples, cannabis retail management agreements, and contract kitchens for breweries as we approach the end of the initial informal comment period later this month. We are currently coordinating with the respective project teams to finalize next steps, which will include sharing preliminary draft rules and scheduling stakeholder feedback sessions to engage constructively with interested parties as we move into the next phase of each of these projects. We've also been actively working on stakeholders' engagement with some of our ongoing rules projects. First, we held 2 retail alcohol product placement rulemaking stakeholder sessions during the last week of September to discuss draft updates. The sessions were very well attended and we received a lot of favorable feedback for the changes we made in response to previous stakeholder feedback. And we also received some really good constructive feedback on further issues to consider. We are getting closer to a final draft, but will likely make a few additional changes and float another draft for public review before we advance to the CR 102 rule proposal. And additionally, because this one is not legislatively mandated and there are public concerns expressed regarding costs associated with this rulemaking, we're looking into contracting out an economic analysis, which could take a few months to complete. We've also been continuing ongoing stakeholder engagement efforts with key stakeholders on the expanded alcohol service areas, second substitute House Bill 1515 rulemaking project. In particular, Representative Reed, the primary bill sponsor, as well as representatives from the City of Seattle and the Seattle Center. There were initially some significant differences in opinion, both internally at the LCB and externally among stakeholders on how to address certain aspects of the bill, including things like the definition of multi-day event, which was not defined in the bill, and the provisions surrounding direct line of sight and barrier height requirements. But through dialogue with key stakeholders, we were able to find what we believe are mutually agreeable solutions. And to that end, a finalized updated draft rule was posted to our webpage last Friday. With the revised draft, we're giving folks a couple more weeks to ensure that we've adequately addressed everyone's concerns before we move to the CR 102 phase, which we reasonably expect to occur next month at this point. Moving on to petitions. Following my update, Denise will be presenting a petition we received on August 18th regarding concerns of unfair business practices among cannabis retailers. We also received another petition on September 28th requesting that the agency update our social equity rules to ease the restrictions surrounding the sale or transfer of a license by a social equity applicant. Since this one is due on November 28th, we'll be presenting it, our recommendation to the board at the next board meeting on November 5th. So that pretty much covers it for now. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Kevin. Any questions for Kevin this morning? Seeing none, Kevin, I do just have a couple of comments, and that is, first of all, yesterday I acknowledged Daniel coming back, and so just again recognizing that, but also I want to take a moment to thank you, and that is for all the, I know that there was a heavy workload for you and your team during the time that Daniel was out, and I just saw you really step up and do an incredible job, so I just wanted to personally thank you for that. Have you made decisions about how you're going to assign? Does Daniel have current assignments yet, or are you still working on that?
He does, yeah. So I kind of took over what he was working on while he was out, and I'm going to be slowly transitioning that back to him. But because I've been pretty closely involved with some of those projects, I'm going to kind of maintain an involvement as well.
Great. Okay. Well, again, thank you for your effort and hard work during the time.
Thank you.
I'm glad. I bet you're glad he's back.
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Anything else?
That's it. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much. All right. Moving on to our next agenda item, we're going to move to general rulemaking, and we've got Jeff Kildall, Policy and Rules Coordinator, to present on board action on CR 103 for acceptable forms of identification. So, Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Volendroff and members Garrett and Holmes. This morning, the Director's Office requests your approval to file a CR 103 Notice of Permanent Rulemaking to finalize permanent rule amendments to the acceptable forms of identification that both cannabis retailers and alcohol licensees may use to verify the age of their customers. This rulemaking project around acceptable forms of identification began with the filing of a CR 101 on October 9th, 2024, to consider possible rule updates resulting from two different rulemaking petitions that were accepted by the board back in 2023, but were paused until 2024 due to competing rulemaking priorities. The first of these two petitions for rulemaking, received from a member of the public, requested changes to WAC 314.11.025 to add an additional form of identification issued by the U.S. government, the Global Entry Card, as an acceptable form of identification for alcohol customers. The second petition, also received from a member of the public, asked for correction of some obsolete RCW references in three other rule sections contained in Title 314 WAC. In addition to the forms of identification for alcohol customers listed in WAC 314.11.025, this rulemaking also updates the types of ID that are acceptable for cannabis customers so that the ID types for cannabis customers match the ID types for alcohol customers and servers. this update to cannabis in WAC 314-55-150 to the acceptable forms of identification for cannabis customers is the first update since the rule was created in 2013. These permanent rule amendments, if approved, will update the acceptable forms of identification for both alcohol and cannabis customers to be the same for both categories of customers by adding the Federal Global Entry Card and the Federal Permanent Resident Card, or Green Card, as it's often known, for both alcohol and cannabis customers. These permanent rule amendments also restate the existing requirement that alcohol and cannabis licensees must follow other applicable state laws during the course of their operations, including laws contained in Chapter 4960 RCW, the Washington State Law Against Discrimination, which includes laws about public accommodation. In closing, I would like to ask for your approval to file the CR 103 and updated rules today. These rule updates will take effect on November 8th, 2025, if they are approved and filed today. Thank you to the board, and I am happy to address any questions.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it. Seeing no questions, this makes sense to me. So, but I'm looking to see if I have a motion to approve the CR 103 for acceptable forms of identification.
This is Pete. I move the board to approve the CR 103 for acceptable forms of identification as discussed.
Thank you. Do I
This
have
is
a second?
Ali, I second.
All right, thank you. And I also concur, so that is approved. Thank you very much, Jeff.
Thank
All
you.
right, we'll move right to our last agenda item, and we've got Denise LaFlume, who is our Policy and Rules Coordinator, here in person with us today. And Denise is going to present on a rules petition review and consideration of unfair cannabis business practices. So Denise, I'll turn it over to you. Welcome.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair Vollendroff and board members Garrett and Holmes. This morning, I'm presenting the Director's Office response and recommendation to the board regarding a petition for rulemaking we received on August 18th of this year from David Sanders of Goliath Pines, LLC, who does business as the Weedery in Vancouver, Washington. That petition asked the board to take action to prevent unfair and illegitimate business practices by certain chains of cannabis retailers that the petitioner alleges are in violation of WAC 314-55-018, and also asks the board to clarify this rule, including adding appropriate penalties. Under WAC 314-55-018, which is the section on prohibited practices, subsection 1 it indicates that no cannabis industry member or licensee shall enter into any agreement which causes undue influence over another licensee or industry member. Also under this section, subsection 2, no cannabis producer or processor shall advance, and no cannabis licensee shall receive money or money's worth under any agreement, written or unwritten. The petitioner alleges that two chains with a combined 9 stores are pressuring processors into not doing business with the petitioner's store, thereby creating undue influence over those processors. The petitioner indicates this practice reduces the availability of products he is able to buy in order to sell in his store, and this situation is negatively impacting his business. The petitioner also alleges this type of practice is widespread among the cannabis industry. As you are aware, in gross substitute Senate Bill 5403, which was passed this last legislative session, goes into effect on January 1st of 2026. Among other things, in gross substitute Senate Bill 5403 restricts coordinated pricing practices across more than 5 retail licenses, such as those described by the petitioner. Currently, RCW 6950-325 3B, limits an individual retailer, licensee, and all other persons or entities with a financial or other ownership interest in the business operating under the license to a total of 5 retail cannabis licenses. Engrossed substitute Senate Bill 5403 amends RCW 695325 to define financial interest, to include any assistance, coordination, or recommendation for the purchase of cannabis products whereupon pricing is coordinated or discounted that confers financial interest across more than 5 retail cannabis licenses. Engrossed substitute Senate Bill 5403, as I said, goes into effect January 1st, 2026. And as you are aware, LCB rulemaking to implement this legislation is underway. The CR 101 to initiate rulemaking was filed on July 23rd of this year. Since then, we have received 50 comments related to implementation of this legislation. And this petition will also be used to inform our rulemaking. Our internal LCB rules project team continues to meet to discuss and develop draft rules. These discussions include amending WAC 314-55018 that the petitioner specifically references. At this point, we plan to conduct stakeholder engagement in the next month. For the reasons described above, the Director's Office staff recommend that, consistent with RCW 35-05330, the board denied the petition received from David Sanders, submitted on August 18th of 2025. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Denise. Questions for Denise?
I don't have any questions, but a comment. So basically what we're saying is we're already working on looking into some of the things that's being requested in this petition. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, because I know that was a hot subject at the Cannabis Advisory Council meeting. So I look forward to more discussions on this, but that's all I had was a comment.
Thank you, Board Member Garrett. I too I think that we have heard from members of the community around this because Senate Bill 5403 is in process in terms of rulemaking. It makes sense to me that we would follow that process. And I would encourage others, including Mr. Sanders, to stay involved in the rulemaking process. It sounds like having 50 comments that people are heavily involved in this particular rulemaking effort, and I look forward to continuing to see the work that's accomplished here with the rulemaking process. So with that, I am looking for a motion related to accept the recommendations of the Director's Office to deny the petition for review and consideration of unfair business practices.
This is Ali. I move that we accept the recommendation to deny.
Second.
All right, and I agree with that, so that is so moved. Okay, well, that concludes our agenda for today, and I will now adjourn the meeting of the Washington State Liquor and Cannabis Board. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
All right.